Eliza Bournet. I'm the assistant web editor at BookPage, and today I'm talking to Liz Kessler, the author of the Emily Windsnap series, which is a middle grade series about a girl who can transform into a mermaid, and the Philippa Fisher series, which is about a girl who discovers that she has a fairy god sister, which is kind of like a fairy godmother, but the fairy is her own age. And today we'll be mostly talking about Philippa Fisher and the Fairy's Promise, which is the third book in the Philippa Fisher series, and it comes out in October. So thank you so much, Liz, for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
And if you could just start by giving some background information, just telling us about the series and what the third book's about.
Okay. Well, the series started because of something that happened to me when I was about 8 years old. I was in my garden making a daisy chain, and I picked a daisy, which I suddenly knew was going to become a fairy at midnight. I just had this absolute certainty. And so I took the daisy and I put it in a tin, and I took it up to my bedroom, and I put it on the windowsill, and then waited for midnight. And then as it got closer to night time, I started getting scared, and I was thinking, what if it's like a really bad fairy, or what if it's some kind of goblin? And I just felt like once this has become a fairy, then it's out of my hands, and this magic could be overwhelming, and I got really scared and panicked, and in the end I was so scared that I scrunched up the daisy and threw it out of the window. And then in the morning I was absolutely devastated, because I just thought, that was it. That was my one and only chance to have a fairy of my own, and I've blown it. And then some years later, a lot of years later, I was telling a friend about this, and she said, well, Liz, you're a writer. That doesn't have to be the end of the story. You can do anything. Yeah, that's a great story. And that's how Philippa Fisher's Fairy God Sister begins, that Philippa actually does exactly this same thing, only the fairy does still emerge for her. A little bit bruised and battered from being thrown out of a window, but she turns up at school. So that was the start of the series, and then the characters just sort of took the story along really. And by the third book, I mean the stakes are raised quite a lot. We've got the fairy godmother world takes place at a place called ATC, which stands for Above the Clouds, and in the third book, we have all sorts of things going on. Philippa gets stuck at ATC, Daisy gets stuck down on Earth.
And there are all these hilarious abbreviations going on. I mean, I think even if parents were weird, teachers were reading along with their kids, there's some humor there.
Yeah.
Very funny. I mean, I love those scenes where the whole sort of corporate world
exactly. Yeah, you really get it. I'm glad about that, because it is, I'm always saying to people, it is quite a corporate world where, fairies have assignments and they have to come down and do them, and it's just a job. But it's I just had so much fun doing it, and it's, they have to crawl through a hole in time and go to this place of frozen time, and I started having fun with some ideas that really excite me with this book.
Well, have you always been interested in fairy tales, or did you enjoy fairy stories when you were younger?
I never have been that kind of person at all. It's weird. I wasn't really one for fairies and mermaids. I was into teddy bears. I liked climbing trees. I got into trouble quite a lot. But not so much fairies, no. But the thing that did excite me then, and which has pretty much stayed with me all my life, and I think this is what I kind of do in my books, I hope I do anyway, is the idea of an ordinary world with ordinary contemporary children, but that the magic comes into that. And those were the kind of books that did excite me when I was young. One of my favourites was The Wishing Chair, where there's this brother and sister who have a chair that sprouts wings and takes them off on adventures. And I used to sit at home in my chair thinking, maybe this time, it'll happen to me. And I've been told by some of my readers that that's how they feel. It's like, maybe this time when I go in water, I might grow a mermaid's tail, or maybe when I pick this daisy, it'll become a fairy. So those are the kind of ideas that excite me.
Okay, great. Well, I had wondered, I read in some interview, or maybe on your website, that you've done a bit of research for the Emily Windsnap books. Like, I think you went to Bermuda to research for one of the books.
I take my research very seriously.
Has there been any preparation like that for the Philippa Fisher books?
I think what I feel that I seriously feel the need to do with every book is that when I know the setting, I have to spend at least some time there. So when I was writing the Emily Windsnap books, I didn't used to live by the sea. I do now because I've moved, but I had to at least spend some time by the sea. And the second book is set in the Bermuda Triangle, And I just had this great opportunity because my dad had some friends who were living there for 3 years and they said, come and stay with us. So I had 2 weeks in Bermuda. I went out snorkeling every day and I'd go under the water and I'd see these amazing things, and then I'd come and literally sit on the beach with my notebook and write descriptions of what I'd seen, and that all went in there. The Castle in the Mist, the third Emily Windsnap book, was inspired by a place called St Michael's Mount in Cornwall, which is where I live, well, very near to where I live now. And I went and I spent two and a half weeks. I stayed in a hotel directly opposite this castle on a hill where the tide comes and goes, and sometimes it's accessible and sometimes it isn't, and soaked up the ideas. And then for Philippa Fisher, the first book, Daisy lives in this treehouse in the garden, and that came about from staying with a friend who had that exact treehouse, and we slept in it one night, woke up in the morning, it was like, oh, that's where Daisy lives. And yeah, and then the second book, I had to spend lots of time in forests, because it was, and then the third book was inspired by stone circles, which we have in England, but you don't really have in America, because they're ancient things. And I just went to loads of these. So yeah, I have to get a sense of the setting in a quite a literal way at some point.
Well, this book is, it seems like the main theme of the book is that Philippa and Daisy, who's her god sister, have to make some sacrifices. There's some choices that they have to make, sort of how far they'll go for their friendship for each other. And when you were writing this book, did you initially intend to write this book about friendship and sacrifice? And do you think that your readers will identify with that?
Oh, I like the question, and it's really weird because I never ever mean to do that. I have never set out to put a message in any of my books or to spread any kind of morals or anything like that. And I never know that they're there until people tell me. And, you know, I think I've written a book about a mermaid, I think I've written a book about a sea monster, fairies, stopping time to crawl through a hole and save the world. But no, every time I've written a book about friendship and loyalty and love and family. And I suppose it's because deep down those are the things, you know, the importance of looking after the people that you love and not being afraid to be yourself and standing up for things that mean something to you. They're things that are deep down really important to me, and I find it part of the kind of magic of the whole process that no matter what I do, they keep on sneaking into the books because they're just part of me. But no, I've never set out to do that. But the second part of the question, yeah, I think that young girls do relate a lot to the friendship. I think friendship is such a, you know, when we're young, I think our friendships are like almost like practice for relationships and marriages, and you know, because they're so important. And yeah, I think those relationships throughout our lives, you know, have the same impact on us. So, yeah, I think they relate to it. I hope so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, here, this is something that I was curious about. I know that your books are published in the United States and also in England. And I don't know if they're published in other countries too? Australia?
Yeah, they're published in about 25 countries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, great. Well,
I'm showing off. But,
no, you asked.
Yeah, America's my biggest market, and then Germany and England. Well, England is obviously where they publish first, but America and Germany and England are the main ones. But then there's all sorts. Korea, Italy, France, Germany, Japan. It's wild. It's great.
Yeah, but it's fun to see all the covers.
Yeah, it is. I've got like these 2 shelves of them, and when people come round to the house, I sort of have my one little moment of showing off and show them those shelves because that's what excites me.
Well, I had wondered if talking to the girls who read your books here, and I know you've been in Nashville doing school visits, and then also talking to fans in other countries, do you feel like the trends are the same in the different, or if your typical fan is the same in different parts of the world, if these readers are looking for the same sorts of stories?
Well, I've met a lot of English and American readers. I've heard from a few German ones. Oh, I met a Norwegian one on holiday in Croatia a few weeks ago. We were on holiday celebrating my dad's 80th birthday, and my nephew came across a little girl lying by the swimming pool reading one of my books in Norwegian, which was that was my one moment of fame ever.